friends, and welcome to Self Meets Soul, a podcast where we discuss how to discover what sets your soul on fire and modern ways to integrate spirituality into your daily life. My name's Juliana, and in today's episode, we're going to learn a little bit more about everyone's favorite topic, food. In today's society, people are a lot more cautious about what's going into their bodies, and for good reasons too. However, with increased attention on food and what is and is not good for you, it can be hard and overwhelming to know if you're truly nourishing your body in the best way possible. Our guest today has a passion for food and has dedicated her career to helping people understand the best ways to fuel themselves. Emily Orvos is a professional foodie, registered dietitian, and board-certified specialist in sports dietetics. Currently, she works as a dietitian at a local university and has recently started her own private practice, Empowered Eats. Welcome to the show, Emily.
So excited to be here.
So before we get into today's topic, I want to know what is something that lights up your soul?
So many things. I think when I think about this, I have like a work-related answer and a non-work-related answer. So the work-related answer is I love when people come to me with a specific goal or something they're really struggling with and want to work on. Whether it's, recovering from their eating disorder or wanting to get better in their sport. And then over time, we build that relationship and we work together and they see progress and they get really excited about that. That makes me really excited. And then the non-work related answer is I love just like spending time with my girlfriends and we just like, we yap and we laugh and we just like, we have a good time and just there's nothing like quality girl time. It just like fills my heart and fills my soul. And I love that.
Yes, agree. It's so true. We've had a lot of good quality girl time in the last year.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. Perfect. Well, to get us started here, what inspired you to get into the diet and nutrition field?
So I kind of have a fluffier answer than I kind of have a deeper answer. So the fluffy answer is that I was a competitive figure skater growing up. And so I saw progress in my skating whenever I saw progress in making changes with my diet. And I wanted to help athletes do the same. And I've always loved food. I started cooking and baking from a really young age. And I remember I was in high school when I made my first cauliflower crust pizza. Like I was ahead of the times.
Dang.
Yeah. I
above the trend.
Yeah. I actually like steamed the cauliflower and then like squeezed the water out and then like blended it with like cheese. Yeah.
I could not do this today.
Yeah. The whole thing. And, I loved like experimenting with food. I thought it was so much fun. And so I knew I wanted to do something with food and something with athletes and something with helping people. And so that's where those roads kind of conjoin to the career that I have today. The not so fluffy answer is through figure skating. And this is so common in the sport along with other aesthetic sports is I had so many body image issues and I developed a lot of really disordered eating habits and disordered exercise habits. And, it's something that, sometimes I still struggle with time and time today, but I've definitely come a huge long way from where I was back in high school and even in college too. And I think there's so much misinformation around health and food and our bodies, especially on the internet and social media. And if I can be one positive voice to make people feel better about their choices, then I'm happy to do that. And I really want to tell young athletes, especially young female athletes, that, things that stuff that I wish someone would have told me when I was in that age. So that's kind of the not so fluffy answer.
Yes, but the real answer.
Yeah.
So that's good. Awesome. Well, what are some common misconceptions? You touched into this, so I'm glad because we're going to go down this road, but what are some common misconceptions that people have around just diet, nutrition, food, just in general?
Oh, there's so many.
I'm sure.
Where do we start? Well, I feel like there's someone demonizing literally every single food out there. Doesn't matter what food group, it's fruit, it's vegetables, it's carbs, it's fat, it's protein, it's everything. There's someone demonizing everything with no true scientific evidence to back that up. And so I have people coming in my office all the time saying, I think probably the biggest thing I see right now is misinformation around carbs. And everyone thinks carbs are bad for you. When carbs are actually the number one fuel source for our brains and our bodies. And it's, really heartbreaking that people come in and, they don't understand that we actually need more carbs than we do any other nutrient in our bodies. And that's why, there's like a world science-driven reason that carbs are in basically every single food we eat. They're not just in our grains and starches, but they're in our fruits and veggies. They're in our legumes. They're in so many different things. And there's like a biologically driven reason for that. So that's just one, but there's, I mean, how much time do we have? I have a million more I can give.
What is another one that you're saying? Just give me one more. I know there's a lot.
And I think we're going to dive down this rabbit hole later, but there's a lot of misinformation around like the ingredients in our food and, you know, how things are maybe labeled differently in here than they are like in other countries. I think we're going to dive down that rabbit hole later, but that's something big that is very misunderstood right now.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. That is interesting to me that you're saying people will even like say bad things about vegetables, because what are they saying about vegetables that like can be bad or demonized?
People think that fiber is bad for you because it, you know, I don't even know what they're saying, but I did see
It's bull.
Yeah. Well, when I tend to see things that are really, like really misleading, I tend to just scroll right past it because I'm like, I don't even want to see this. Like, because it's not only not good for my mental health, but I just don't want to create like an algorithm on my social media that's contributing to like, you know, that's feeding me false information. And so whenever I see something that's really outlandish like that, I usually just scroll right past it. And I kind of just wait for the information to come to me in my office. But I did see someone the other day say, like on the internet, some, you know, crazy influencer say that, you know, like fiber is bad for you. And I'm like, no, like actually 95% of Americans are not eating enough fiber. And that's not good.
Also necessary for those toilet times. So listen.
No, literally. No, literally. All the girlies are like, I'm bloated all the time. I'm like, you don't eat any fiber.
Right. Right. You're like, this is simple.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is good to know. And I do love that you say that about carbs as someone who eats a lot of carbs. So I'm like, I know there's a balance.
Yes, there does have to be a balance, but yes, people are so scared of them and people, you know, cut them out and then wonder why they have no energy.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't even like, if I tried, I couldn't even.
Well, especially you as a vegan, like even your like protein sources are going to have more carbs in them than like meat, for example, has no carbs in it, but like, you know, soy and tofu and tempeh and things like that and beans like do have some carbs in them. So you couldn't go keto even if you tried.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't recommend it.
Right. Which brings me to the next question. So if a patient tells you they want to be on a vegan diet, keto diet, pescatarian diet, whatever it is, which one raises the most red flags for you?
Oh, keto, 100%. Because the thing about keto is a lot of people actually aren't doing it correctly. And a lot of people don't realize that it's actually a medical diet. So it's created for people with epilepsy. Because the idea is that since carbs are the predominant fuel source for your brain, the idea is that if you just completely eliminate carbs or keep them to like an extremely limited amount of your diet, the idea is you essentially starve the brain and you starve out the seizures.
Interesting. So do they do that like in hospitals? Like
sometimes.
Wow.
Sometimes. Usually not in hospitals. Usually it's children with epilepsy that they'll trial it for. But yes, but when you're actually following a true keto diet, it's very, very hard to follow because you can only have up to 5% of your daily calorie intake coming from carbs. So you can't even eat like one banana or like one piece of bread, basically, without going over your limit. But what a lot of people don't realize is that to do a true ketogenic diet, you also have to limit your protein as well. And a lot of people will eat, you know, these giant steaks or like 12 eggs at one time. And it's like, well, the way our bodies work, our bodies actually take extra protein that we eat, and our liver goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, fun science term, and actually takes that extra protein and turns it into carbs anyway. So you're actually knocking yourself out of ketosis by eating too much protein in a keto diet as well.
I'm sure this will be very eye-opening for people. I remember I told you about my friend in college who started going to this personal trainer while we were both vegan. But he told her she should also go on keto, like to get to the goal weight or whatever that she wanted. And She literally, oh my God, this this menu, like her meal plan or whatever, was tofu. She was allowed like a grapefruit once a week as a dessert. I don't even know what else was in it because she literally couldn't eat. Like, she was vegan, but also trying to do keto, which you just said is impossible. And she was so, I was not encouraging at all, which like maybe some people will think is crappy, but I was like, you know, when we would go out drinking, I would be like, yeah, eat these Cheez-Its because I'm like, please eat something normal.
No, I'm glad you were doing that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, I think there's so many people providing nutrition information now that I think a lot of people don't know like who to trust and where to get information from because like on the surface you think, oh, personal trainer, someone who does exercise, like surely they know about nutrition, right? But it's like, no, like personal trainers, I have or did have my personal training certification before I let it expire. But there's essentially no nutrition training. There's a couple pages on nutrition in the book, and it's very much like these foods have carbs in them, these foods have protein in them. And it also says refer patients to a registered dietitian in the personal training book. So personal trainers are not nutrition experts. The only nutrition experts out there are registered dietitians. But there's a lot more people on the internet that are not dietitians providing nutrition advice, and that makes my job really difficult sometimes.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure very frustrating because you are having people, like you said, come in and tell you about something, and you're like, this is not true. Like, that is frustrating when you work so hard to be trained in something and go through all this education, and then there's like people out there who are like, but no, this is like the easy way out.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and there's so many limits on, you know, what you can and can't do if you don't have a nutrition certification. Like anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. Like you could call yourself a nutritionist because it's not a legally protected term, but like, which I don't recommend you do.
I'm not.
No shade, but don't do that. But you know, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist without any like formal training. And so that's where it gets really scary because they create these social media pages saying, you know, I'm a nutritionist. And a lot of people don't know that that's not, there's no requirement for that. Whereas like me to be a dietitian, not only did I need an undergrad degree, but I also needed a master's degree. I needed 1,200 hours of clinical rotations. I passed a board exam. I have to do continuing education. And so like we are the nutrition experts and we're the only ones certified to do medical nutrition therapy. So, which basically means if you have any kind of health condition, anyone who's not a dietitian is not allowed to give you nutrition advice because every medical condition requires different nutrition interventions for it.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So if someone who's a personal trainer, like if your friend had, you know, diabetes or an eating disorder or a thyroid condition or kidney disease or anything like that, then that personal trainer is essentially giving illegal nutrition advice.
Right. And it was thankfully it didn't last long. It was very obvious because she was so, I mean, and she did lose the weight like fast and she looked like how she wanted to look, but she was tired.
How did she feel?
She didn't feel great.
Yeah.
She's like, I look good, but I don't feel good.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's so huge about it is that so many people are so aesthetic driven in their goals. And like, I really empathize for people who have aesthetic driven goals because our society as a whole does treat people in certain bodies better than other people in other bodies. And that's really sad. And that's not how our society should be. And so I really empathize with people who want to change their bodies for that way because they want to feel more loved and accepted by society. Yeah. So like, I really empathize with people who have that goal. But a lot of times it does come at the cost of your energy, your mood, how you feel, your relationships, your social life. There's so many different factors that go into your health that are, you know, how you look does not equate to your health. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's a reason that people say like, or that Snickers thing, like, you're not you when you're hungry. Like, and it's people true. Are hangry. Like, there's a reason that your mood is like, when you are hungry or depleted of certain nutrients, you know?
Yeah, and I'm guilty of it too. Like I'm usually pretty good about eating a meal or a snack, you know, every few hours, eating really consistently. But if I've gone too long, like I am not a good person to be around.
Right.
So like it, you know, like I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on top of that, are there any diets that can be overall safe and healthy?
It really depends on the person. So, if there's like a medical condition involved, like if someone has celiac disease, for example, obviously they need to follow a gluten-free diet for a medical reason, right? Like you choosing to be vegan, like if that's something you want to do because I know you care for animals, like and environmental reasons, like that's great as long as you're like, getting all your nutrients in, right? It's interesting because a lot of dietitians don't love diets because I don't think there's necessarily like a need to label the way we eat, especially when eating is something we have to do all day, every day, multiple times a day for the rest of our lives. And so if you label the way you eat, it kind of puts you in a box to where, you're restricting something and, you're not allowing yourself the full variety of nutrients that you can get if you just ate, every possible type of food.
Yeah.
So I think the short answer to that, the best way to eat is just to eat enough. It's to eat adequately. It's to eat a variety of foods. It's to get multiple food groups at your meals and snacks. That's such a simple way to put it, but a lot of people aren't even doing that. So, we got to start with the basics before we get into like the cool, fun, sciencey things, right?
Right. Yeah. And I do feel like you mentioned this earlier a bit, when you were like, well, how did she feel? I feel like that, like your body in all aspects will usually tell you when something's wrong, especially after like an extended amount of time, whether that's just like you have a cold or whatever. So I feel like if you're on a diet, a particular diet, and you feel good with it, you don't notice, I don't know, any major shifts in like a downward direction. Obviously, you should still like get vitals checked and stuff like that, but that's usually like a good sign, would you say?
Yeah, and it so depends on the person. Like, I have plenty of people come to me that, let's take like an athlete, for example. Like if I have an athlete that comes to me and they are just having no energy during their games, they have no energy during practice, and then I look at their diet and they're eating, maybe they're having a coffee or an energy drink before morning practice, and then they're having a protein shake after training, and then they have class all day, and then they eat like a super large dinner at the end of the day, and that's not working for them, right?
Yeah.
So once we figure out how can we make your eating more consistent and actually fuel your activity and fuel what you're doing, then yeah, they're probably going to end up feeling better. But it depends on the person and what's right for everyone. It depends on your schedule, it depends on accessibility, it depends on your knowledge and your ability to cook or desire to cook. Like there's so many factors. Yeah, and there's so many things that go into it that just general social media nutrition advice doesn't look into, because when someone comes to sit in my office, I'm looking at them as a whole person. I'm asking about, how competent are you in the kitchen, and, what's your budget for food? What does your social life look like? Because then that gives me a better idea of suggestions to give you.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. And with going into that social media stuff, so we've talked a bit about how there's a lot of frauds out there. So how can someone spot whether there is any truth to what like a wellness person, a fitness person, someone on social media is saying?
Yeah. So kind of like what I alluded to earlier, a registered dietitian is generally going to be the best person for nutrition specific advice. But some other things to look out for from like a negative perspective is if someone is talking in absolutes, like when someone says, you should never eat this food is bad all the time, and they're creating kind of like a fear mongering out of their page, they're generally giving, these little half truths or shreds of science that aren't totally accurate. And that's something that we're seeing a lot, where the people are walking through the grocery store and they're like, look at this product, it's bad, never eat it. And it's like, okay, those are usually the quacky people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and also I'm guessing like just because someone, let's say they're a nutritionist or something, or they're just really into the food space online, even if they have a bunch of followers, that does not qualify them in any way.
No.
Yeah.
And your body's not a business card either.
Right.
I see so many what I eat in a day videos that start with an ab shot or a butt shot. And it's like, okay, like, you have no idea how they got that body. They might have great genetics. They might be taking steroids. They might be taking Ozempic. There's so many different things. They might have had the good lighting. They might be editing their pictures and videos, because you can Photoshop videos too.
Yes, yes.
So, you really have to think critically about what you're looking at and think, is this, is this someone that I want to emulate and want to follow because of what they look like, or because of, their energy, their mentality, the way they educate. You got to think about what you're hoping to get out of following that person.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's like it's also fake anyways. And when I don't know, it really stuck with me when you were like, how do they feel? Like how does that person online like actually feel? We have no idea. This is just like a bunch of little snippets. Like they could very well have an eating disorder or just be like miserable trying to maintain that body. And sometimes I feel like I try to think of that too, where I'm like, oh, I wish I looked more this way, or I want to look more like this. And then I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be eating all this pasta so much. But then it's also like, well, I don't know. Like, it's at what cost sometimes. I feel like there is to get that unrealistic kind of change a lot of the time in your body, it is at a negative cost to like your own mental health and even sometimes like physical health with the restrictions.
And that's something I see so often in kind of the eating disordered eating realm, is that they give up lifestyle for sake of looking a certain way. Mm-hmm. And of course, yes, like it's really important to prioritize like eating healthy, balanced, adequate meals, whatever that looks like to you. It's important to prioritize physical activity in something that you enjoy, right? It's important to prioritize like getting enough sleep. Like all these things are important, but if you're so rigid in your routine that you're giving up time with your friends, time with your family, you're sacrificing your social life, you're sacrificing your mental health, you're sacrificing time that you could be, doing a hobby or doing something you enjoy with your friends for sake of like, researching food or whatever it may be, then that's when it's a problem.
Right. Yeah. And I totally didn't like tell you I was going to ask you this question, but you mentioned it and I'm so curious. What does like your world think of Ozempic? Like, what are your thoughts on Ozempic?
So the thing is, Ozempic is a medication for diabetics. And because so many people are taking it for the purposes of weight loss, it has now become less accessible to the people that actually need it. Mm-hmm. And I empathize with the people who want to take it because, maybe they feel like they've tried everything under the sun and their body hasn't changed. So I understand why so many people want to take it. I do. Do I, I'm very much like, this is your body, your choice. Like, I'm not here to tell you to do or do not take this medication. But for the purpose that this medication was designed is for a specific health condition, and people who do have that specific health condition are now paying more for that drug or having a harder time getting that drug because it's used off-label now for so many different people. And a lot of people who are taking it really are not, in my opinion, don't need it. Mm-hmm. But again,
like the celebrities.
Yes. But again, like it's their body, their choice. Like, that's between them and their doctor. I'm not in on that. So yeah, it's their choice.
My biggest thought is like, this can't be so easy. And I know like it's not easy because it's not really accessible money-wise, but as far as like, oh, I take this drug and then they lose like drastic amount of weights, I feel like there has to be a catch. And the catch, I feel like, is some long-term issue down the road.
There have been stories of some pretty nasty side effects of just, GI distress and nausea and lack of appetite and lack of energy, because when you do lose weight so quickly, of course, that's going to affect your energy levels. So there's stories of a lot of people having some pretty negative side effects, and kind of going back to what we talked about, like, sure, they might like the way they look taking the drug, but usually they don't like the way they feel. Right. I mean, there are exceptions to that rule, of course, but ultimately, like, I kind of the same as you, I am curious to see what research is going to say later down the road of people who are taking it. And there are stories of people who, they took it for a certain amount of time and then they stopped taking it and they ended up gaining the weight right back. So the thing is, like, it's not a magic pill. Mm-hmm. Like if you are choosing to take this, if you want to maintain the results, then you do have to create some lifestyle changes as well.
Right, right. Very interesting. Sorry to go off track. I was
No,
like,
that's
I just
okay.
want to know like what her thought is on all of that. So this kind of, we touched on this a little bit, but, and I did want to dig a little deeper into that. Do you believe that there's a certain point where someone can be too cautious about their diet? And I know you said, you know, they're changing their lifestyle but more so like when you see someone, you're working with someone and you're like, this sounds like they might have like an eating disorder or they are developing one.
Mm-hmm.
What is kind of like what are the signs kind of?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different signs, and it's really dependent on the person, because sometimes people totally don't understand what they're doing. Like I have, especially with athletes and active people, sometimes they come into my office and they just truly did not realize how much their bodies needed. You know, maybe they've been playing their sport their entire life, so they've always had a higher energy expenditure and higher energy needs than the average person, but because they've been playing their sport their whole life, they never really thought to think, oh, like I need to eat more than my friend who is, you know, an art major rather than
like, what can I say here?
you know, someone who like, you know, I have to eat differently than my friend who has a different, maybe less active hobby or, you know, activity than I do, right? So I have several athletes that come to me and they technically have disordered habits in quotation marks, but it's because they just truly do not understand how much their bodies need. Right. And sometimes these people come to me and we talk about it, I educate them, and they're like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And then they make some changes pretty quickly. And, you know, they can usually see me in just a few sessions and then kind of be good to go.
Yeah.
And then just kind of see me as needed. But then with other people, when it is more intentional, when it is more about, you know, I want to change my body, or sometimes it's, you know, everything in my life is out of control. I need to feel like I need to control something so I can control my food. I can control my calories. I can control my intake. When I see obsessive weighing, obsessive calorie tracking, when I hear someone say, I feel like I have two brains in my head, the brain that's saying, you know, eat this, and then the brain that's saying, no, don't eat that. When you start to see, you know, the kind of like these major sacrifices made to like their social life and their mental health, like we talked about earlier, that's a really big sign. It really is dependent on the person. And it is important to know too that not everyone with an eating disorder is underweight medically. So that's why it's so important to actually talk to these people and figure out what their lifestyle habits are, to figure out, you know, where they're coming from. You know, are they exercising every single day? Are they exercising out of guilt and out of punishment? A lot of it, when it comes to what's the difference between health and disordered, can sometimes be a really blurry line, but generally it depends on the motivator. Are they taking part in this exercise, for example, because they enjoy it and because it's fun to them? Or are they doing it because they think it's going to help them achieve a certain body type and they're doing it as a punishment, or because they ate something and feel guilty? So it's about the motivation behind the behavior too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I told you recently that I was visiting someone in California and they were tracking their calories, and they just started seeing a personal trainer as well. I don't know if the personal trainer told them to do this, but this person has actually done it in the past as well. And I'm just like, I don't know. We got like burgers, we got food, and she was like, oh, I don't know if you care about calories or anything, but just so you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I don't care about calories. And I just feel like, is there any way in any circumstance that calorie tracking is an okay behavior?
Yes, with the caveat that generally, and I will preface this by saying that I do use calorie tracking in some instances. So a good example is like, I currently have a patient that I'm working with right now who he is really, really struggling with an eating disorder. But he is currently over exercising and he's currently tracking his calories right now. My end goal for him is to have him stop tracking, but he's not quite ready for that yet. And so he's still tracking, but we're upping his calories to make sure that he's eating enough to compensate for the exercise he's doing, because he's still working on limiting his exercise.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, it could be good for maybe similar circumstance for an athlete who comes in with really low energy and they, they just don't know how much they're eating. It can be useful to track for maybe a week or two to see where they're at and where we can add some changes there.
Yeah.
So I don't think calorie tracking is inherently a bad thing, but more often than not, it goes down the wrong path. And
yeah, I feel like that makes you slip with what you're saying. That makes sense because they're already, it's like you're trying to pull them kind of out of this. You can't just yank them out like that. You know,
Yeah.
you're making
it's steps, baby steps.
Right. But when there is no like you're not overeating or anything, like you're just eating like normal people eat, I just feel like it makes you obsessive. And then it just very quickly.
Yes. Most people that come to me with either an eating disorder or disordered eating, it started with calorie tracking just out of curiosity. Or, oh, I'm doing this for my health. Or, I just want to make sure I'm hitting my protein goal or whatever it is. So I think calorie tracking oftentimes starts really innocently, but then more often than not, it ends up not being innocent. So I think calorie tracking can be a useful tool in the short term in some circumstances. Okay. But I would say as a general rule, more often than not, I don't recommend it for most people that come to see me.
Okay. Good to know. So kind of moving on from that, what is your opinion on the overall food culture? That's a big topic, but food culture and safety in the US.
So I'm glad we're talking about this because, like I alluded to earlier, this is an area that has a lot of misinformation around it. And it's something that I'm seeing a lot on social media lately. And I think I'm debating where I want to begin because there's so many different avenues I could take with this. But actually, let me ask you this. Is there a specific area that you are picturing with this conversation and where you want to start? And that can kind of give me my launching point.
That's a good point. I guess we can kind of start off with thinking about, like I went to France. And so portion sizes here are very big, or even the fact that a lot of the unhealthier foods, which just happens to a lot of low income areas, like are cheaper than like the higher quality foods, and things that are healthier, quote unquote, are more like not as accessible for everyone.
No, and that's a really good point. Like, 1 in 6 children in our country experience low food security. And that's a huge problem because it's, this all comes back to like systemic issues in our country, right? But if you have children that are food insecure, they're going to school, they can't pay attention in class, so their grades fail. And so that, though that dominoes into like the rest of their life as they're growing up, right? So this all starts when kids are so young. But yes, there are so many food deserts in our country where, maybe the closest quote unquote grocery store or place where a family can buy food is, a gas station or a convenience store where like, sure, maybe there's a cup of fruit there for $5, or they can get, a frozen pizza or a frozen burrito for $2. Yeah. Or, a fountain soda is cheaper than a bottle of water. Mm-hmm. We have several cities in our country that don't have clean water. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just about, drinking water to hydrate, but thinking about, how do you cook pasta? How do you cook rice? Right. How do you rinse your produce? We need clean water for that, right? So it all goes back to just systemic issues in our country. And, so many people, especially in those low income areas, like are just trying to feed their kids. And, when it comes down to, if we're going to go through a fast food drive-through and get stuff off the dollar menu, or rather now it's probably like the $2 or $3 menu.
Taco Bell, I'm looking at you.
Oftentimes for a lot of families, that's cheaper than, going to, maybe they don't have access to a grocery store. Maybe they don't have a car, so they rely on public transit, but they don't have the ability to get to a true grocery store. So, it's really sad and it's really unfortunate. And, I'm not totally sure what the solution is apart from like really paying attention to like who we're putting into office and see like who's, who is raising concerns about these issues.
Which I feel like they aren't. I feel like this is never like barely a topic. Like our food and just like, which literally is your whole life, like what you eat pretty much. I feel like that's never like a point of focus for anyone. Except for, I remember, what was Michelle Obama's thing? Was that hers or was that something else? Yes, I don't know, whatever it was with the school food.
I remember she wanted to take certain snacks like out of the vending machines at school. Like she wanted to do less candy and more like healthy snacks, and people uproared about that.
Pissed.
People were so mad about it, and I'm like, but I think that was a great thing that she did because she was making nutritious food more accessible to kids.
Right. And it's like, I feel like that's the only time I've heard of someone in politics, like, choosing a point of focus, a first lady, choosing a point of focus that relates to food, because food does affect everything. Like, what you eat affects your life. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just one of the things I was thinking about.
Yeah. And of course, like on an individual level, like, for example, like I donate monthly to World Hunger Project, and, there's so many other, hunger causes that are doing good in our country and in the world and trying to make it better. But ultimately, like, it's really unfortunate that there's not really a ton of like huge impact we can make on an individual level, apart from, can you donate your money? Can you donate your time? Who are you voting for? But unfortunately, it really breaks my heart that there's not much more we can do to like change, the landscape of food deserts in our country.
That's what feels like the most upsetting to me, I feel like, is that there really is nothing like we can do, like on a, like you said,
on a large scale impact.
Right. Like we are literally eating we're eating food, buying food, and we are just trusting that everything about it is safe, where it's grown, how it's grown. And like we just don't know really. We're basically putting our trust into, the FDA and whoever else is up there.
Yeah. Well, and that being said too, like, we do have regulations on our food in our country. Like, it's not just a free for all of all these like, things going in our food. And I know there's a lot of discourse on the internet right now about, these ingredients that we allow in the US are banned in Europe and all these other things, but there's actually plenty of ingredients that are actually banned here that the EU does allow. So it does go both ways.
Do you know anything that you can think of, maybe not like an ingredient or some type of like product or something that they allow that we don't? Do you know anything like that?
Yeah, so there's actually, there's several things, but an example that pops in my head right away, there's, they use a certain fat in some of their foods. They're called vegetable carbons, and it's a certain type of hydrogenated fat that we don't allow here in the United States because hydrogenated oils have been shown to increase risk of cancer and heart disease. There's certain colors that, we allow and they have banned in Europe.
Red 40.
But there's colors that Europe uses, and usually it'll be an E with 3 number digits after, and we have those banned here in our country. And a lot of times things will be labeled a little bit differently in the United States versus in Europe. Like, for example, high fructose corn syrup in the United States is glucose fructose syrup in Europe. So it's not even that things are necessarily using all different ingredients. They might just have a different name for them.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. That is good to know, especially the color thing. Because, yeah, I felt like this so random, but there was this guy I was training at work, and we were making jokes about Red 40 because literally everything he was drinking Skittles water. The man's like 40 years old. So he was putting Skittle powder into his water, and we were like, you need to just drink water. We're turning it over on the back, and we're looking at all the different like things that are in it, and then we're like, oh, Red 40. And then he was eating this snack, and then we were dying because he was using a face mist that had Red 40 in it. Okay, what is going on? And then this girl was talking about how Red 40 can cause, like, I don't know, seizures or something like that. And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't think it's probably like the best, but I don't know if I would go to that end.
I think we have to think about context in these things, right? Like, are we drinking Skittles water to like be healthy?
To feel something?
Like, no, like I'm sure he's drinking Skittles water because it tastes good.
Yeah.
Like, like we have to think about context here. Like, M&Ms, for example, like I don't think anyone is eating M&Ms because they, it's going to help them feel strong and powerful and it's going to prevent disease. Like, no, people are eating M&Ms because they taste good and they're fun and they're nostalgic, right? So, we don't just eat food for the sake of health. We eat food because food is community, food is culture, food is nostalgia, food is social, food is comfort. Food is so many different things rather than just taste. And, food would not taste good if it was only meant to nourish us.
Right.
Food is meant to nourish us and other things as well. But also it's important to know that the dose makes the poison too.
Mhm.
Like, let's take, a great analogy is alcohol, right? Like, if I give you one sip of wine, you're not going to get drunk. If I give you a bottle of wine and you drink the whole thing, you're going to get drunk. So it's all about the dose making the poison with all these ingredients as well. The dose of a lot of these like additives and things in our foods are not enough to cause a severe effect unless you are eating massive amounts of these foods.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So as a dietitian, just broad scope, what do you notice your patients struggling with the most? And this can be in any type of way.
I think just diet culture in general, because diet culture is everywhere, right? It's on social media, it's in our conversations, it's something we grew up with, right? Like, I know, and mom, I love you, but but I grew up with Special K and Atkins bars and all these protein shakes like in my house growing up.
Mhm.
And that combined with me being a figure skater, like I remember me and a girl that I skated with, and this is in 6th, 7th grade, we had a competition to see who could get a 6-pack first. And do we think that's healthy for middle schoolers? No.
I thought you were going to say bra stuffing. I'm like, we all been there, girl.
Oh, I didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Some don't have that problem, I guess.
Can I unstuff?
How do I unstuff this?
But no, it's all around us. It's on social media. It's in all of our conversations, and it's such casual conversation. People will say, just throw out statements like, oh, I shouldn't be eating that, or, oh, I'm eating so bad, or whatever it is. Or, oh, I don't like the way I look in this, or, there's so many different things out there, and diet culture is everywhere. It's in our schools. It's in, it's in our friend groups. It's in our safe spaces like yoga studios and churches and, gyms. Like it really is inescapable.
Yeah.
And so just kind of the constant pressure to look a certain way is really, really exhausting, not only for women, but also for men too.
Yeah, totally. It really is. I'm like, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, that's like kind of miserable. Like, you really do have to like try hard to kind of take yourself out of that, I guess, in a way, and just like be okay with all these other factors. Or just like you were mentioning earlier with people who maybe go on Ozempic, like you even can do whatever crazy diet, or you can exercise the right amount you're supposed to, and you still may not be like happy because your body like it might just not look like that, might not be able to look like that.
Yeah, I know when I was really kind of in the depths of my own eating disorder, when I was at my smallest body, I felt terrible and I was getting injured a lot. I don't really have great memories from that time just because I don't think my brain was like cognitively working at full capacity. Yeah. So there's large chunks of time where I really don't have very many memories because I just wasn't fueling myself enough to, like adequately make my brain work. Yeah. So I really, really empathize for people who struggle with it because it truly is everywhere and it's really hard to escape unless you set some really strong boundaries. Yeah. Like, it's all about not only just, redoing your algorithm on social media, but even like unfollowing and muting people that personally. It's about, setting boundaries with your friends. It's about setting boundaries with family. It's setting boundaries around the books you read, the shows you watch, the magazines you pick up, the articles you see. It's everything and everywhere.
Yeah. The shows you watch. Yeah. That Dallas Cowboys cheerleader thing, I was like, why am I triggered? Just like, this is insane. Like this big.
Yeah, well, we grew up on America's Next Top Model.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the size 4 models are plus size, and it's like, come on.
Right.
Tyra.
Right. Come on now, Tyra. We love you, but girl.
And I'm sure she's learned too, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was just a product of her environment, for sure.
Exactly. When she was a model growing up, she was taught, I'm sure, that she had to look a certain way or else she wouldn't get jobs.
Right. No, totally. Right. So on kind of the more of the positive things that we can do, what do you think are some attainable ways that someone can improve their diet without verging into this like unhealthy territory?
Yeah. So there are so many things you can do. And I think it all comes down to like where your starting point is. And I like to tell people, like, whenever people come see me in my office, we're not focusing on 10 things at a time. we're focusing on one, maybe two small changes at a time that can build into habits. So like, just general rule of thumb, like, I like to ask some of my friends, when's the last time you ate a vegetable? Juliana's silent right now because she's
Wait, I put artichoke and spinach on my pizza.
There you go.
Yeah, I added it because I've been really thinking about adding little vegetables to things.
But, I'll like thinking about like, are you eating like a fruit and a vegetable every single day? Are you drinking multiple bottles of water a day and not chugging all at one point, but actually drinking all throughout the day? Are you giving yourself a balanced breakfast before you start your work day? Are you taking time in your workday to actually eat like a balanced lunch to give yourself energy to get through the rest of your day? Are you having a carb-based snack an hour before you go work out to give you energy so that way you can get through that workout better? Mm-hmm. Are you eating a protein and carb-rich meal after your workout to replenish? Are you adding, beans and legumes and other fiber-rich sources of other fiber-rich foods to your meals? There's so many like little things you can do. And I think a lot of people don't like to hear all these basic things, but a lot of people aren't doing the basic things. And so again, we have to start with the foundational things before we can really get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Coffee is not a breakfast meal.
Coffee is not breakfast. You heard it here first.
Groundbreaking. I literally can't believe I taught and I was so tired that I did not want to eat breakfast. So coffee was the only thing. And I'm like, no wonder I was having a mental breakdown every single day. Like 25 kindergartners. And I started my day with just coffee.
I don't know how you did it.
No. And now I like love eating breakfast every morning.
It's great.
Yeah.
And like, I totally empathize with the people that, they wake up and they feel nauseous in the morning. They don't feel hungry, but our bodies are really adaptable. And so if you don't feel that hunger cue first thing in the morning, your body can adapt to that. And your body can develop that hunger cue with training and with time. Your gut and your GI system is a muscle, just like any other muscle in your body. You can't squat 225 without first squatting the bar. So, maybe a really small step is like with your coffee, maybe we have like a banana and peanut butter with it. Maybe we make a little smoothie in the morning. Maybe we have an apple and a hard-boiled egg. Maybe it's something so small, but once you kind of get that down, then you can start adding a little bit more and getting into more things like overnight oats or a yogurt bowl or bagels, breakfast sandwiches, omelets, whatever your breakfast choice may be.
Right.
And that goes with any of these goals too, right? Like, start with something small and attainable and then work your way up from there. Don't try and go all in 100% because then it's not going to stick.
No, which I feel like is why a lot of people fail on diets, right? Like they just are like, okay, I'm cutting this out. I'm going to only do this now. And then you're like, oh, but I miss chocolate or whatever. It's like, well.
And restricting something generally leads to binging. Mm-hmm. So that's why I do not recommend cutting anything out completely unless you have to for a medical reason.
Yeah. All right. So you have recently started your private practice. So
I have.
So exciting. Tell the listeners more about it.
Yes. So it's called Empower Eats. Shout out to my friend Riley for coming up with that name. Ooh. And shout out to my friend Becca for coming up with my logo. It's great having friends in different industries that I can utilize their services for.
Yes.
But yeah, so my specialties that I work with are athletes and eating disorders, and the two very often do coincide and, have both as well. So that's going to be, kind of my main target audience. I can see clients in Arizona, and I do virtual as well. So, I'm going to be predominantly virtual. Mm-hmm. So, you don't have to worry about like leaving your house or finding me in an office or anything like that. But yeah, check out empowereatsllc.com for more info if you want to schedule an appointment with me.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Emily, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
It was fun. Where can the listeners connect with you?
Hopefully my website is up and running by the time this airs, but my website is empowereatsllc.com. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Amazing. So I will be sure to put that in the episode notes. Well, that is all that I have for you today, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to leave a review and share this podcast. You never know who in your life might resonate with it. Chat with you later.